Emeka was the kind of man everyone in Enugu knew. The young repairman with oily hands and a warm smile. He could fix almost anything. Old radios, broken fans, or noisy generators. Even when his clothes were stained with grease, his eyes carried dreams bigger than his small workshop. He often told his girlfriend, Ifeananya, about his vision of becoming an engineer, of building real homes for people who slept under leaking roofs. At first she loved that about him, his passion, his simplicity, his endless hope. But as time passed, her admiration began to fade. While she worked at a fancy fashion store surrounded by rich customers, she started comparing her life to theirs. She wanted more. Polished dates, fine clothes, luxury. To her, Emeka's dreams began to sound childish, like stories with no ending. Each time he talked about blueprints or affordable housing, she would smile faintly but look away. The gap between their worlds grew wider with every word unspoken. Still, Emeka never noticed the change in her eyes. He believed love could wait until success arrived. Every night, he wiped his tools, whispered prayers for better days, and drew sketches by candlelight. He didn't know that while he dreamed of building homes for strangers, the foundation of his own relationship was already cracking. One hot afternoon, Emeka sat on the floor of Ifeanyanya's apartment, trying to fix her blender. He wanted to surprise her, to show he could make things work again. But as he turned the last screw, the motor sparked and died completely. The smell of burnt wire filled the room. Ifeanyanya's face twisted with frustration. "You can't fix anything, Emeka," she shouted, her voice sharp like glass. "You can't even fix your life." Her words cut through him deeper than any wound. She went on, saying she was tired of dating a repair boy, who always had grease under his nails. She wanted someone who could give her comfort, not broken promises. Emeka stood there, frozen, watching the woman he loved pack her things. Moments later, a sleek car pulled up outside, her new boyfriend waiting with the engine running. Without a glance back, she got in and drove away. Emeka felt the world around him go silent. The tools in his hands suddenly felt heavier than ever. That night, sitting alone in his tiny room, her words replayed in his head like an echo he couldn't escape. But instead of breaking him, something inside him shifted. He looked at his calloused hands and whispered, "Maybe I can't fix machines right now, but one day I'll fix lives." It was the moment pain turned into purpose, and his journey truly began. After Ifeananya left, Emeka felt empty but determined. He refused to let her words define him. The next morning, instead of fixing radios, he went to a nearby construction site and asked for any kind of work. They gave him a shovel and told him to mix cement. His hands blistered, his clothes soaked in sweat, but he didn't complain. Each day, as he carried heavy blocks, he secretly watched how the engineers measured, planned, and built. He studied their movements like a student watching his teachers. During breaks, he'd ask quiet questions, eager to learn every detail. When others mocked him, calling him the repair boy turned laborer, he just smiled. At night, when the site was silent, he'd sit by a dim bulb with his old phone, watching YouTube lessons on construction, foundation strength, and affordable housing designs. Sometimes his data would finish, and he'd walk to a cafe just to download more videos. Sleep became rare, but his hunger to learn grew stronger. Slowly, he began sketching his own small house designs in a notebook, his first real blueprints. People laughed when he shared his ideas, but he didn't care. He told himself, even bricks start as dust. That spark of belief became his fuel. While others saw a poor laborer, he saw a future engineer being built, one brick of effort at a time. One night, a heavy rainstorm hit Emeka's community. The wind roared, roofs flew off, and muddy water flooded the narrow streets. By morning, several poor families had lost everything. Their walls collapsed, their children shivering in the cold. Emeka walked through the wreckage with tears in his eyes. He couldn't stand watching people suffer while he had hands that could help. Without waiting for permission, he gathered a few of his friends from the construction site. They picked up leftover materials, broken wood, old zinc sheets, cement scraps, and began repairing the damaged homes. For 3 days straight, they worked without pay, sleeping under makeshift tents. People from nearby streets came to watch, amazed at his effort. Soon, a local journalist filmed him patching a roof for an old widow. The video spread quickly online, and people began calling him the repairman with a big heart. He didn't do it for fame. but for the joy of seeing children sleep under dry roofs again. A week later, his phone rang. It was a representative from a construction NGO in Abuja, who had seen the viral video. They told him they were offering him a spot in a professional housing development training program, all expenses paid. Emeka stood there speechless, the same hands that once fixed blenders now being invited to rebuild lives. It was the moment destiny finally knocked on his door. After completing the training in Abuja, Emeka returned home with a new fire in his heart and knowledge that could change lives. He used his small savings to start a tiny company called Rebuild Africa. It wasn't fancy, just a wooden table, a few tools, and a bold idea: to build affordable, eco-friendly homes using recycled materials. His first project was for a widow who had lost her house in the storm. With the help of a few young volunteers, he built her a small, solid home from old containers and leftover bricks. When people saw it, they couldn't believe it was made from scraps. Word spread quickly. Soon, flood victims and poor families began reaching out, asking for his help. Emeka didn't turn anyone away. He worked day and night, building one small house at a time. Local newspapers featured him, calling him the man rebuilding hope. His sincerity touched hearts. NGOs and investors started noticing his efforts and offered funding to expand his work. Within months, Rebuild Africa grew from a backyard dream into a registered company with workers, vans, and projects across states. Communities that once had nothing now had homes, real walls, strong roofs, and dignity restored. Emeka had finally built something greater than machines. He built a movement. People no longer called him a repair boy. They called him a hero who was rebuilding Africa, one home at a time. Months later, a grand charity event was held in Lagos to celebrate new affordable housing projects. The hall glittered with lights, music, and the city's wealthiest faces. Among the guests sat Ifeanyi, dressed elegantly, holding the arm of her rich boyfriend, the same man she had chosen over Emeka. She smiled proudly, unaware of what was about to happen. The event began, and the MC took the microphone, his voice echoing across the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our guest of honor, the visionary behind Rebuild Africa, Engineer Emeka Okere." The crowd erupted in applause as Emeka walked in wearing a sharp suit, surrounded by his team. Cameras flashed, and reporters rushed forward to take photos. Ifeanyi's smile vanished. Her hand trembled as she stared at the man she once called a repair boy. The confident way he walked, the respect in people's eyes, it didn't feel real. Her boyfriend whispered, "That's the guy who builds homes for the poor, right?" She couldn't answer. Her heart pounded as memories of the day she insulted him came flooding back. Every word she had thrown at him now echoed louder under the spotlight. Emeka took the stage, thanking the audience humbly, speaking with calm authority. As he spoke about rebuilding lives, Ifeanyi realized she hadn't just lost a good man. She had lost a future she once laughed at. The room clapped for him. She sat frozen, her pride silently collapsing. After the event, when the lights dimmed and people began to leave, Ifeanyi quietly walked toward Emeka. Her heart raced as she watched him laughing with city officials and reporters. When he finally noticed her, she forced a smile. "Emeka, I didn't know you'd become this big," she said softly, her voice trembling. He looked at her, calm and composed, the same eyes she once saw filled with pain. "You were right," he replied gently. "I couldn't fix everything then, but now, I fix lives." His words carried no anger, just quiet strength. She lowered her gaze, tears building up, trying to explain, to apologize, but he only shook his head with a kind smile. "It's okay," he said simply. Then he turned away to greet a group of young men wearing Rebuild Africa shirts. His team of builders he had trained from the streets, boys who once had no hope but now worked with pride and purpose. The crowd gathered around him, cheering his name, cameras flashing again. Ifeanyi stood alone, watching the man she once belittled become everything she never believed he could be. The sound of his laughter mixed with applause filled the hall, and she realized the real revenge wasn't in hurting her back. It was in his peace, his success, his heart free of bitterness. Emeka walked away surrounded by the lives he had rebuilt, while she stood still, humbled and speechless. A few weeks later, Emeka visited one of his newest housing sites on the outskirts of Enugu. The sun was bright, and children ran barefoot across the compound, their laughter echoing between the fresh painted walls. Mothers hung clothes on lines, Fathers carried buckets of water, and every face glowed with peace. Emeka stood quietly, watching the families settle into their new homes. Homes that once existed only in his sketches and dreams. On one wall, a bold sign read, "Built by Rebuild Africa, turning broken dreams into strong foundations." He ran his fingers over the words, smiling softly. For a moment he remembered the night he sat alone with a broken blender, hearing Ifunanya's cruel words. Now those same hands that once shook in shame had built hope that could not be broken. He looked up at the sky and whispered, "Maybe I was never meant to fix machines. I was meant to fix people's hope." The breeze carried his words gently across the site, as if the earth itself agreed. Children waved at him, shouting, "Uncle Emeka, the man who builds dreams." He waved back, eyes glistening with quiet pride. The camera would fade on that image. Emeka standing tall, smiling through tears, surrounded by homes that stood strong. From the man who once couldn't fix anything, he had become the man who fixed everything that truly mattered.